In all, 32 people claim to have witnessed the shooting of Michael Brown by Officer Darren Wilson. Of these 32, 8 were deemed credible by Barack Obama's DOJ. All 8 offered testimony that exonerated the cop. None, deemed credible, offered testimony that refuted the cop's claim that he acted in self-defense. But what about the other 24? In a recent video, I described their claims and why they weren't taken seriously by the grand jury. In short, they lied like dogs. However, not all of them lied to try and convict the cop. One lied to try and spring him. So you have 23 lying to convict, 1 lying to exonerate. What was the media's reaction? Get ready for this one. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnny Walker Dredd to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dredd Show.
This is Democracy Now!, and I exposed this Marxist front a few years ago for their ludicrous coverage of the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. You know that Amy Goodman here is your Starbucks cat lady, posting pseudo-intellectual tweets about all the literature she has read. Too bad she has the research skills of Rashad Ritchie. Her guest, Juan Gonzalez, is no better. Let's watch how he handles juggling the bios and stories from 24 witnesses. Will he get their stories confused? Will he manage to cover them all? Will he be able to soak in the meaning of having so many people come out of the woodwork to convict a cop that had never done anything to them? Well, let's see.
Well, as protests continue across the country over the police killing of Michael Brown, new questions are being raised about the grand jury that failed to indict Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson.
As if that was the grand jury's job. We sent you in to go and indict that boy, and you failed.
For shooting Brown. Many questions center on a woman identified in the grand jury document simply as witness 40. She told the grand jury that Brown charged at Wilson, quote, like a football player. Her testimony largely supported Wilson's versions of events and has been cited repeatedly on Fox News.
So given all 24 lying sacks of shit, Gonzalez winnows them down to a single headline: White racist tries to free murderous cop. That's right, all 24, and he only focuses on one of them.
And then, quote, he looked like a football player with his head down, charging at Officer Wilson. Charged at him, quote, and I'm reading, like a football player with his head down charging. That Michael Brown, was charging like a football player full force on Officer Wilson. One witness described it as charging at Officer Wilson like a football player with his head down. Don't charge him, to quote one of the eyewitnesses, like a football player with your head down.
Earlier this week, the Smoking Gun website identified witness 40 as Sandra McElroy. The website described her as a, quote, bipolar Missouri woman with a criminal past who has a history of making racist remarks and once insinuated herself into another high-profile St. Louis criminal case with claims that police eventually dismissed as a complete fabrication.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and name her. What about the others? Well, naming them could open them to harassment.
Here at Democracy Now!, we respect everyone's right to privacy and work hard to maintain confidentiality of witnesses who are brave enough to come forward with their stories.
Right.
It now appears that Sandra McElroy may have lied about witnessing the shooting, which occurred 30 miles from her home. She gave conflicting accounts to prosecutors about why she was near the Canfield Green Apartments in Ferguson at the shooting. She first said she wanted to pop in on a friend she hadn't seen in 26 years. Later, she read from a notebook in which she claimed to have been visiting the neighborhood to conduct personal research to help her understand black people. It has also come to light that she had a history of posting racist comments online and help raise money for Wilson and other Ferguson police officers. On Tuesday, the Reverend Al Sharpton said the report about witness 40 gave new hope to the Brown family. He told the New York Daily News it shows the grand jury was, quote, not a fair process.
Well, if Al Sharpton says so.
Joining us now is William Bastone, editor of The Smoking Gun. He co-authored the piece exposing the identity of witness 40. Tell us more about her, and how did you find out who she was?
But what we did is we looked at the 2 volumes of her grand jury testimony, which is heavily redacted, but we zeroed in on the portions that gave a little bit of biographical detail about her. Excuse me.
Did you do that for the other 23 liars? How about the 8 that admitted to lying so that they could help convict an officer?
And we used that information, you know, everything from the fact that she was adopted, divorced, had a couple of felony convictions, and some other stuff. And then we...
Oh, she was divorced. Oh, my God.
We basically went online and looked at some a Facebook page that we believe she was associated with, and I'll spare you all the details, but by a process of elimination, we zeroed in on her, figured out, got her name, and then we went and checked on Sandra McElroy's background, and it basically dovetailed exactly with Witness 40. Everything.
In her testimony, she had admitted that she'd been convicted of
check fraud.
2
right? Felony counts of check fraud in 2007, had received 3 years of probation, suspended sentence.
Yeah, what about theft? What about filing a false police report? You know who did that? Dorian Johnson, the same dude that fed you the horse manure of hands up, don't shoot. Does that pose a problem for you?
And so, you know, we reached out to a couple of other people who had had interactions with her, and it made us convinced that it was the same woman.
So how was she presented to the grand jury? What did the police know? What did the district attorney know? And explain exactly what she said.
Well, she initially, she was not found by law enforcement. She approached law enforcement more than a month after the incident. She approached the St. Louis County Police, gave an account of what occurred. 5 weeks later, she met with the FBI and 2 Justice Department prosecutors, and then the day after that, they put her in the grand jury for the first time.
No mention of the person who came forward 7 months after the shooting. But then again, that person tried to get the cop convicted, and that's much different as far as you care.
So she comes up with this story that she sat on for a month and tells the cops this story. And then 5 weeks pass before she basically goes into the grand jury. And the thing that is incredibly puzzling is that I don't think that anyone attempted to determine whether what she told them was true or not.
That's false. The DOJ reported that her testimony was of little value to the court. Here are some excerpts from the actual DOJ report. Although the physical and forensic evidence was consistent with her account, the timing of her disclosure and the details of her narrative caused investigators to question her veracity. Therefore, federal prosecutors and agents conducted a follow-up interview. Gee, it kind of sounds like they're a little skeptical. We move on. The specificity of this description initially caused SLCPD detectives concern because it mimicked an obscure media article which offered theories about how the SUV rearview mirror came to be folded inward and how beaded bracelets found at the scene landed on the ground. During Witness 140's follow-up interview, federal prosecutors asked her about this online article, and Witness 140 acknowledged reading it prior to meeting with SLCPD detectives, possibly using it to fill in gaps in her memory. Investigators also questioned Witness 140 about the route she took out of the complex, which looks navigable on a map, but in reality is blocked by a concrete street barrier. Witness 140 stated that she went immediately home and told no one about what she witnessed except her ex-husband. However, when SLCPD detectives attempted to verify this, Witness 140's ex-husband reported that Witness 140 has a tendency to lie. Witness 140 also admitted to federal prosecutors that although she told no one about what she had witnessed, she posted comments on websites and Facebook about the shooting. Her comments were blatantly profane and racist. Witness 140 was twice convicted of passing bad checks, felonies that are crimes of dishonesty and likely admissible in federal court as impeachment evidence. Although Witness 140's account of this incident is consistent with physical and forensic evidence and with credible witness accounts, large parts of her narrative have been admittedly fabricated from media accounts, and her bias in favor of Wilson is readily apparent. Accordingly, while her account likely is largely accurate, federal prosecutors determined that the account as a whole was not reliable and therefore did not consider it when making a prosecutive decision. But to hear this guy tell it, investigators just accepted her claims because she was white.
Because as we point out, I don't know if we point out in the story, but our interest in investigating her began and found out who she was and everything about her. It took us 2 days to do that.
You hear that? 2 days to find out everything about her.
We don't have subpoena power. We can't get her phone records. It took us 2 reporters 3 days to find her.
Now it's 3 days. Gee, you sound just like the witnesses that claimed hands up, don't shoot.
And the cops had 5 weeks to find out. First, the story on its face was wholly unbelievable.
Well, actually, her account of what happened was accurate. But other parts of the story did undermine her credibility. But that was true for all the other 23.
And there were just simple investigative tasks that the cops could have done that could have disproven her. So,
again, go back and read the report. In their investigation, they expressed severe doubts about her story. Ferguson is unusual in that the prosecutor decided to send all of the willing witnesses to the grand jury, regardless of whether they could be trusted or not. Usually, you only send those that you can count on to help convict, which means their testimony must be inculpatory and credible. So here comes this white woman who tells a story that, frankly, was rather hard to believe. And he jumped all over it. As far as the other 23 goes,
who cares about them?
So what they did, who knows what they did. But what the effect is, as I think we point out in our story, is that they basically allowed her story now to get baked into the narrative of the grand jury.
What about the other 23? Whose stories were even more ludicrous? Are you upset that their stories got baked into the narrative of the grand jury? What about hands up, don't shoot? Are you upset that that became a slogan? A rallying cry, even though it was total baloney? So in the end, BLM's followers learned what from this expose?
Darren Wilson only got off because of this one white woman who lied. Because you can't trust white people. They're always lying to get their own kind off the hook. Remember that white woman in Ferguson?
And this is the very essence of cherry picking. Pluck the one example out of 24 and make it sound like the common denominator. And that's how the hard left operates. The entire myth of police brutality is carried by this fallacious logic. And what I just showed you is a perfect example of what that looks like. The Democracy Now! Panelists then spend the next 10 minutes dissecting this woman's claims, background, children, pets, favorite foods, all the while patting themselves on the back for their investigative journalism. I'm sick of it, and I'm sure you are too. Like my video and subscribe to my channel.